He left me for his secretary and planned a wedding like I didn't exist. But when I walked into that ceremony holding a velvet box filled with the ashes of our loyalty, and the national convoy rolled up behind me, they finally realized who I was. I wasn't just his wife. I was the classified force behind his empire. And I didn't come to cry. I came to bury him with the truth. The scent of dust and cold air was the first thing that greeted me when I stepped inside our villa. The curtains hadn't been drawn in weeks, the orchids on the window shelf had wilted in protest, and the thermostat blinked like it had given up hope of warmth returning. 3 months abroad, buried in a project I couldn't talk about, surrounded by code names, clearance levels, and the occasional whisper of national security risks. And the only thing waiting for me at home was silence. Silence and a letter. It lay on the console table by the entrance just beneath the mirror I never looked at anymore. I might have ignored it except for the curious red wax seal stamped dead center on the envelope. A crisp crest, Anderson Group. I frowned. Who even used wax anymore? The envelope was thick. Heavy. Hand-delivered, judging by the absence of postage. But what made my skin prickle was the note stuck to the top of it. From Bethany. For you personally. Bethany. Justin's secretary. The woman who made lingering eye contact last Christmas when she handed me a glass of champagne and called me Mrs. Anderson with a wink. With a cold curiosity curling in my stomach, I peeled it open. Cream-colored card. Gilded border. Calligraphy so flourished it could make your eyes spin if you weren't used to reading diplomatic documents. Mr. Justin Anderson and Ms. Bethany Green. Cordially invite you to celebrate their union. I stopped reading. A strange, distant sound filled my ears, like I had stepped underwater, or like the world had tilted sideways and my heart hadn't gotten the memo yet. My fingertips grazed the edge of the card again. Fully. As if the name might change if I blinked enough times. But it didn't. It said Justin Anderson. My husband. I stared at the gold font for a long, long moment. Then I walked to the kitchen, set the invitation down and called him. No one answered the first time. The second time it rang longer. On the third attempt I heard his voice. Sarah. Flat. Emotionless. Like he hadn't even looked at the caller ID. Like he answered out of obligation. I didn't reply immediately. I let the weight of the moment settle like ash. Tell me it's a joke, I finally said. There was a pause. Just long enough for him to realize what I meant. Then he laughed. A short, bitter chuckle that lacked amusement and landed somewhere between mockery and boredom. You got it, huh? I did, I said coldly. Delivered by Bethany herself. How poetic. He didn't answer. You're getting married, I said slowly. To your secretary. While still married to me. Silence. I waited. My heartbeat was steady. My tone was ice. When he finally spoke, it was with that voice that made my skin crawl. The one he used in board meetings when cutting employees off at the knees. Sarah, he said, voice flat, I don't know what kind of life you've been playing at for the last few years, but let's not pretend you're surprised. I'm not surprised, I said. I'm insulted. That makes 2 of us. I didn't flinch. He continued, you're never around. I come home to an empty house, and when you are here you're on your laptop or some midnight flight to a country you can't talk about. You live in secrets, Sarah. I also pay your father's medical bills, I said sharply. In cash. Without hesitation. I've handled 2 of your corporate crises with my government contacts and made sure your name didn't land in national media twice. And I didn't ask you to do any of it, he snapped. No one did. You think that absolves you of respect? Respect? He barked out a laugh. Sarah, don't play saint. You've lived in my family's home, eaten our food, used our money. You weren't even supposed to be my wife. You were a favor. A political marriage sealed by a dusty agreement between my father and yours. I didn't reply. Not yet. He kept going, the venom dripping now. You think just because you wear a government badge and fly on jets I paid for that you're untouchable? I'm not the one committing adultery. You're not the one who matters. That was the last line. The one that burned. Still, I didn't let my voice crack. I see, I said, voice steady. So this is what it's come to. You always thought you were too good for this family, he spat. Floating around the world like some glorified paper pusher. At least Bethany's real. He's here. She wants to build something. She wants to steal what someone else built. She's giving me a child. The silence that followed was thunderous. I inhaled slowly. You have a child with her. His tone didn't change. We have a future. A real one. You could have told me, I said. Like a man. I don't owe you that. I let the phone drop slightly, lowering the volume. I didn't need to hear him scream. I just needed to let him run out of steam. You've always been nothing more than a shadow in this house, he ranted. We barely see each other. You want to act like you're shocked? Please. Who knows who you've been seeing on those little disappearances of yours? You really think that's what this is about? I think you like the power. The pity. Being Mrs. Anderson gave you status. But guess what? You're not even relevant anymore. I smiled, faint and unreadable as I stepped into the hallway. You sound angry, I said. Of course I'm angry. You're calling me days before the biggest moment of my life and throwing a tantrum. I haven't even started. His voice dropped to a sneer. Threaten me again and I'll make sure. You'll what? I cut in, voice deadly calm. Have your mistress drop off the next wedding invitation with my name scratched out in red ink? He fell quiet. I continued. You're getting married. That's your choice. But let me be very clear. We are still legally married, Justin. And this little PR fairy tale you've cooked up comes with consequences. Adultery isn't a private matter. Not when it involves corporate shares, inheritance clauses, and the Anderson brand image. You're bluffing. Am I? There was a pause. I could hear the faint clinking of glass in the background, the sound of him pacing. Probably in his office. Probably still smug. But beneath that I caught it. Hesitation. Then came the final blow. Sarah, he said, voice hard, you are nothing. Nothing but a face my father took pity on. If he hadn't insisted, I would have had a real wife by now. A woman who actually gave a damn about me. Something cracked in my chest. But it wasn't heartbreak. It was the last thread of tolerance snapping free. You're right, I said softly. He paused. What? You're right, I repeated, voice silk-wrapped steel. You should have had someone else. Someone who matches your level of intelligence, ambition, and moral bankruptcy. You think you're clever, don't you? He growled. No, Justin, I said with a faint laugh. I don't think I'm clever. I know I'm patient. That's far more dangerous. And then, in the most casual tone I could manage. Enjoy your wedding. I'll send a gift. Then I hung up. For a long time I didn't move. I let the silence settle around me again, heavier now but oddly peaceful. I wasn't sad. Not even angry anymore. I was ready. He thought he had humiliated me. He didn't realize he had just opened the door for me to burn everything he built, with a smile on my face and the law on my side. And I always did look good in black. The next morning, the sky outside the villa was the kind of gray that made even birds hesitate to sing. I hadn't slept much. I didn't need to. Some betrayals don't leave you broken. They leave you focused. I sat by the window in a silk robe, sipping black coffee, the same one Justin used to complain tasted like engine oil. The invitation lay open on the glass table before me, now creased at the corners from how many times I'd picked it up and set it down. Not to reminisce. Just to remember that it was real. He was really marrying her. Bethany. His secretary. The woman who had once offered to fix my lipstick in a bathroom at a gala and called me madam with a fake smile. Let them have their wedding. I would give them something worth celebrating. I stood and went to the closet. My luggage from the assignment was still untouched. I had planned on unpacking, maybe even lighting a candle and pretending to be a normal wife for an evening. Not anymore. I pulled out a sleek charcoal sheath dress, tied my hair back, and dusted on a lipstick just dark enough to pass as war paint. At exactly 9:02 a.m. the front door slammed open. No knock. No call. No hesitation. Bethany strutted in like a runway model. Only less grace, more delusion. Behind her followed a small parade of staffers. Movers, decorators, and 2 Anderson Group assistants holding garment bags and floral arrangement portfolios. She wore 6-inch heels and a high ponytail so tight it looked like it was pulling all the thoughts from her brain. In her hand was a designer tote swinging with each self-important step. Move faster, she barked, walking across the Italian marble like it was already hers. The guest room wallpaper needs to be stripped, and the master closet cleared out before noon. I remained seated on the velvet sofa in the sunken living room. Legs crossed. Coffee in hand. Calm as a queen on her throne. Bethany didn't notice me right away. But when she did, her steps faltered slightly, just a stutter. Then she recovered with a smile so smug I nearly applauded the effort. "Oh," she said. "You're still here." I took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "I live here." "You?" She laughed. "Not for long, darling." I set the cup down on its saucer with surgical precision. "What do you think you're doing?" I asked, voice like silk covering barbed wire. Bethany didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her tote and pulled out a forest green document folder. With exaggerated flair, she flipped it open and waved a glossy title page in my direction. "See this," she cooed. "Justin officially transferred ownership of the villa. It's in my name now." She beamed as if she had just cured cancer. "This is my house, Sarah. I'll move in as I please. You can finish your coffee, pack a bag, and be out in 20. I stood slowly, the hem of my dress falling smooth as water around me. I approached her until there were only inches between us. "You didn't even wait for the ink to dry," I murmured. "Desperate much?" Bethany blinked, but only once. She tilted her head and smiled wider. "I waited long enough. I chose this villa myself, you know. Years ago. The only reason you ever lived here was because I let you." That made me laugh, soft, sardonic, and entirely unbothered. "You let me?" I echoed. "I've been patient," she went on. "Justin and I were meant to be. You were the mistake." "Bethany," I said, turning slightly to face the window. "Tell me something." She folded her arms. "What? How long have you been watching my husband like a hawk in heat?" Her smug expression flickered. "You think I'm ashamed?" she said proudly. "You were never really his type. You're too uptight. Too cold." "No," I replied thoughtfully, "just too smart to fall for cheap perfume and company email flirts." Bethany took a step forward, voice sharpening. "You still don't get it, do you? He chose me." I stared at her for a long beat, then leaned in ever so slightly and whispered, "Then why does it feel like you're still fighting for him?" Her cheeks flushed. Before she could respond, one of the decorators called out from the hallway. "Ma'am, where should we hang the custom initials?" "Anywhere but here," I answered for her. Bethany turned on me. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said, calm and flat. "You may have the deed, but I'm still Justin Anderson's legal wife. That makes this intrusion questionable. At best." Bethany's nose flared. "You're clinging." "No, dear. I'm calculating." I walked past her and stood by the staircase. "Do you know what this villa cost?" I asked, turning slightly to face her again. "Not just in money. I'm talking about reputation. Time. Compromise." Bethany rolled her eyes. "Spare me the sob story." "I'm not telling it for sympathy," I said, walking down the first step. "I'm reminding you that everything here, every corner, every rug, every imported panel of flooring, was paid for by someone who knew how to build an empire. You're just here to redecorate it." She lunged forward then, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "You really think this house will remember you?" I smiled faintly. "I don't need it to." "You will." Just then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I walked back to it without hurrying, picked it up and glanced at the screen. A text from an unknown number. "I heard what happened. Do you want me to intervene?" I didn't reply. "Not yet." Bethany followed me like a fly drawn to light. "Still playing queen? You really are delusional." I turned back to her, sliding my phone into my clutch. "Bethany." She raised a brow. "Enjoy the housewarming. I'd offer you a candle, but you and Justin already burned down anything worth salvaging." I walked out of the living room, leaving her standing there with her folder and false confidence. Flashback. 3 years earlier. It was raining when Jason Anderson came to our door. The Anderson group was bleeding. Stocks down. Lawsuits mounting. Scandals circling like vultures. My father, a quiet, cautious man, invited him in despite the storm. I had just returned from a UN cybersecurity summit. My career was skyrocketing. My personal life, non-existent. Jason spoke for over an hour. About an old engagement agreement. About loyalty. About legacy. About Justin. He needed stability. A name that carried weight. A marriage that calmed investors. I remember staring at the fireplace that night and thinking, what harm can come from lending your name to a dynasty in need? I said yes. Not out of love. Out of duty. Justin didn't even show up to the wedding ceremony. We signed the papers in silence 2 days later. He told me plainly. Let's keep things civil. You live your life. I live mine. Don't interfere. And I didn't. Till now. Back in the present, I walked upstairs. I wasn't going to pack. Not yet. I had no intention of letting them think I'd been driven out in a cloud of shame. Let them plan their wedding. Let them dream their fairy tale. I'd be attending. And I wasn't bringing champagne. The Anderson Group headquarters sat like a glass and steel monument in the heart of Harbor City, arrogant, angular, and completely unaware that the storm coming its way wasn't on the weather radar. Me. I arrived just before noon, dressed in all black again. The doorman paused, eyes flickering between my face and his tablet. Mrs. Anderson? He asked, already nervous. Still legally accurate, I replied with a smile. Unless your records say otherwise. I stepped into the marble-floored lobby where every inch screamed wealth. On my way to the executive elevator, I caught the stares. Some were wide-eyed. Others deliberately blank. But all of them were whispering. Isn't that Justin Anderson's wife? Wasn't she gone for months? She's back just in time to watch the wedding. I kept my stride elegant and unhurried, like I hadn't been stabbed in the back but had simply come to check on a few loose threads. At the elevator, I tapped the button to the top floor. The chrome doors whispered shut. The silence hummed. So did my plan. By the time I reached the executive wing, Justin's assistant looked like she'd seen a ghost. Mrs. Anderson. I'm sorry. Mr. Anderson, he's in a meeting. I'll wait, I said. She gave a nervous smile. He asked not to be disturbed. I leaned slightly across the desk, not threatening, just close enough to smell the citrus toner in her foundation. I'm not a disturbance, I said, my tone as pleasant as it was final. I'm his wife. She faltered. I understand, but he really... I'm going in, I said simply and pushed past. The door to Justin's office was unlocked. I opened it without knocking. And there he was, seated behind his desk, top button undone, no tie, and Bethany perched on his lap like a smug accessory. They jumped. I didn't. Bethany scrambled to stand up, tugging at her blouse. Justin's expression turned from surprise to annoyance in 2 seconds flat. Sarah, he said, rising slowly. We've already discussed this over the phone. What more do you want? I shut the door behind me with a soft click and strolled to the leather guest chair across from him like I was arriving at a brunch date. What more do I want? I repeated. Let's start with decency. End with closure. Bethany narrowed her eyes and leaned on the desk, voice syrupy and venom-laced. She's here for money. I tilted my head at her. If I wanted money, sweetheart, I said, smiling, I'd be sipping wine in Monaco by now. Not here breathing in your expired Chanel. Bethany flushed. Justin exhaled, already irritated. This is exactly why I didn't want you here. You're so dramatic. No, I replied smoothly. You're just not used to women who finish what they start. Justin sat back down, folding his arms. What are you trying to do? Block the marriage? You don't have the leverage. I'm not here to block anything, I said. Just to clarify a few facts. I reached into my handbag and placed a small folder on the desk. Inside it, certified copies of our marriage license, joint asset statements, and something extra. My personal affidavit of every financial favor, partnership agreement, and off-record assistance I had extended to the Anderson family over the past 3 years. Here's the thing, I said, tapping the folder. You've lied to your board, your father, and possibly the legal department about our status. I'm still your wife. On paper. In the eyes of the law. Justin waved it off. That paperwork is outdated. The divorce is already being processed. And yet, I replied, I haven't signed anything. Bethany cut in. You think this little tantrum is going to stop anything? You're yesterday's news, Sarah. I smiled politely. You're adorable when you try to talk like a real executive. She lunged a step forward. You don't belong here. I built this place, I said coolly. Brick by brick. PR disasters? I buried them. Supplier lawsuits? I silenced them. Justin's reputation? I upheld it. I turned to Justin. And this is how you repay me? He was quiet. But his jaw was tight. Bethany scoffed. You think you're some kind of martyr? No, I said. I'm the warning shot. Justin finally stood. That's enough. I rose too, matching his height. You married me for convenience. Fine. I agreed because I was stupid enough to believe that loyalty meant something, even in the corporate world. But cheating on your wife, transferring joint property to your mistress, and planning a public wedding while still legally married? That's more than immoral. It's illegal. Justin stepped closer. You wouldn't dare drag this to court. I smiled. Try me. There was a silence. Then he laughed. A cruel, hollow sound. God, you're full of yourself. You think you can walk in here, throw some paperwork around, and scare me? I am the Anderson Group. I walked to the window, looked down at the people bustling below like ants under tinted glass. No, Justin, I said without turning. You were. Until today. I reached into my bag again, pulled out a pen and clicked it once. Here's how this works, I said. I walk out of this office quietly. You file for divorce properly. You keep this marriage from turning into a scandal. And if I don't? I turned and stared him dead in the eye. Then I attend your wedding. Bethany rolled her eyes. As what, the flower girl? No, I said. As the legally bound wife delivering a gift no one will forget. Justin's face changed. It wasn't fear, but it wasn't confidence either. It was the dawning realization that I was no longer the silent, traveling wife he could walk over. I leaned forward. I gave your father every reason to trust me. You gave me every reason to leave. Let's not add exposure to the list. Bethany looked at Justin. She's bluffing. I laughed. Bethany, darling. If I were bluffing, your office wouldn't be bugged, and your browser history wouldn't be sitting on a secure server waiting for subpoena approval. Her face went pale. Justin clenched his fists. Get out. I was planning to. I gathered my things. Have a wonderful wedding, I said over my shoulder. I'll be there. With a very special box. I exited the office with the same composure I entered. As I passed the assistant, she couldn't meet my eyes. At the elevator, I caught a few more stares. Some of pity. Some of awe. But none of them mattered. The doors closed behind me. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I was finally done pretending to be the good wife. The Anderson Green wedding was the most photographed event of the season, and it hadn't even started yet. Hundreds of high-profile guests filled the estate. Politicians, business magnates, fashion editors, and influencers with surgically sculpted smiles. Every corner dripped in wealth. Champagne fountains, crystal chandeliers, custom-made aisle runners embroidered with Justin and Bethany's initials in gold thread. The air buzzed with gossip and glitter. Then I arrived. Not in white. Not in designer pastels. But in a long black gown, heels sharp enough to draw blood, and a somber expression that drew attention before I even stepped onto the marble. And in my hands, a funeral urn. Not a replica. Not a symbolic trinket. An actual urn. Black, ceramic, engraved with a single word. Loyalty. The guards at the gate didn't stop me. They couldn't. They recognized me. I was still, by law and title, Mrs. Justin Anderson. And Mrs. Anderson had arrived. As I walked through the central courtyard and up the aisle, the whispers started like a wind blowing through a field of snakes. Is that her? Justin's wife. No way she showed up. Is she holding an urn? Oh my God. That's a funeral urn. This can't be happening. I moved with precision, elegance, and unshakable calm, every step a quiet declaration of war. At the altar stood Bethany, dressed in a gown that cost more than some small businesses. Her hands were clasped in front of her as she smiled and greeted guests, until she saw me. Her smile faltered, then twisted into disbelief, then into pure rage. She stepped off the altar and stormed down the aisle, holding up her skirt. Sarah, she barked. You're out of your mind. Get out. Now. I stopped 10 feet away from her, the urn still cradled in my arms. You sent me an invitation, I said smoothly. How rude would it be to ignore it? Bethany laughed bitterly. You think this is funny? No, I said softly. I think it's fitting. I walked forward and gently set the urn at her feet. He stared at it, confused. What the hell is this? A gift, I said, locking eyes with her. You brought a funeral urn to my wedding? She scoffed. You've finally lost it. No, I said, but you did. You lost the one thing I gave freely. I nodded toward the urn. This is what's left of my loyalty. Since you burned it, I thought I'd return the ashes. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Several guests took a step back. Phones began to lift, silently filming. Bethany's face turned beet red. You psychotic bee. Before she could finish, I picked up the urn and flung it. Hard. The lid popped off midair and gray ashes exploded across her white dress like a curse. They coated the satin, the veil, and the manicured grass beneath her feet. For a moment, the entire courtyard was silent. Bethany froze in place, covered in the dust of everything she destroyed. Then the shrieking began. You absolute lunatic. Do you know what you just did? Security. Get her out of here. The guards hesitated. Half of them looked unsure. The other half didn't dare move. Bethany charged forward, eyes blazing, lifting her arm. I stood still. She raised her hand. I didn't flinch. Just as her palm was about to swing, a sharp voice rang out from behind the gates. Stand down. Every head turned. A convoy of sleek black sedans rolled onto the estate's long drive. They weren't ordinary cars. They were government issue. Each door opened in perfect sequence, like a choreographed threat. From the lead vehicle emerged Ryan, dressed in his standard gray uniform, sunglasses still on despite the dusk. He wasn't just respected. He was feared. Bethany's hand dropped. Ryan walked through the crowd, flanked by 2 armed officers. He didn't glance at anyone, not the guards, not the guests, not even Justin, who had just emerged from the villa in confusion. He walked straight to me and bowed. Not politely, deferentially. Miss Sarah, he said. We came as soon as we received your signal. Gasps scattered like dominoes. He called her Miss Sarah? Isn't that Ryan Carter? The Deputy Defense Director. Why is he here? Bethany stepped back in disbelief. What the hell is going on? Justin finally reached the scene, eyes wild. Sarah, what are you doing? Ryan ignored them both. Do you need extraction? I shook my head. Not yet. Bethany pointed. She attacked me. She humiliated me in front of everyone. Arrest her. Ryan turned to her. Expression blank. Voice level. Who is this? Bethany Green, she screamed. I'm marrying Justin Anderson. Ryan turned slowly to me. She attempted physical assault? I nodded once. Raised her hand to me in front of witnesses. Ryan gave a short nod. Understood. He looked to his officers. Secure the perimeter. Do not allow anyone to leave without clearance. Await further orders. Bethany's eyes widened in horror. What does that mean? Ryan turned back to me. We'll wait on your word. I smiled faintly and looked out across the crowd, silent, stunned, and beginning to buzz with theories. My job here was done. For now. Bethany was still struggling against the officers as the guests stood frozen, half of them staring at me, the other half pretending to check their phones to mask the discomfort. Ryan hadn't moved from my side. Bethany, her wedding gown smeared with gray ash, pointed a trembling hand at me. You can't arrest me. This is insane. I'm marrying into the Anderson family. Ryan didn't even blink. Correction, he said. You were attempting to marry into the Anderson family. As of now, you're being detained as a suspected infiltrator. The words struck like lightning. Gasps. Murmurs. Shocked silence. Did he say, infiltrator? Is this a setup? Who the hell is Sarah? The crowd shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether they were guests at a wedding or witnesses to a state operation. Bethany's shrill voice cracked. You can't do this. Justin, say something. Justin stood stiffly near the altar, his jaw clenched so tightly he looked like he might crack a molar. His gaze flicked from Bethany to me to the men in tactical uniforms and back again. This is a misunderstanding, he finally blurted. She's just my secretary. She doesn't even have access to sensitive. Mr. Anderson, Ryan said calmly, I suggest you remain silent unless you'd like to add obstruction to your name. Justin flinched. A beat later, the voice that cut through the stunned air was one no one expected. Stop everything. Heads turned again as a sharp, authoritative voice approached from the main entrance. Jason Anderson. He walked in with barely concealed rage in his posture, his cane tapping furiously against the polished stone floor. His face was pale, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, burned with disbelief and fury. He stormed through the crowd, pushing past socialites and corporate allies like they were furniture. When he reached the circle of tension, me, Ryan, Bethany, and Justin, he didn't look at his son first. He looked at me. And bowed. Silent. The crowd went dead silent. Jason Anderson, CEO Emeritus of the Anderson Group, business legend of Harbor City, bowed to me in front of his entire empire. A hush descended so thick you could hear someone drop their stock portfolio. "Miss Sarah," he said, voice heavy, "I sincerely apologize for arriving late." I nodded. "You arrived exactly when you needed to, Mr. Anderson." Jason straightened, then turned with venom toward his son. "You fool," he hissed. "You begged me to give you the company. You cried that you were ready to take on the family legacy. And this," he pointed at the chaos, at Bethany still shrieking in cuffs at the shattered wedding altar, "is how you repay us." Justin took a shaky breath. "Dad, I didn't know. Sarah, she didn't tell me who she really was." "You didn't need to know," I cut in coldly. "You needed to be loyal. That was the only test." Jason's voice thundered. "Do you realize who you've betrayed?" Justin looked at me in confusion. "What does that mean?" I turned to the crowd, those still in their seats, others now standing behind hedges and pillars, watching as if history was being written on marble. It was. I took a deep breath and let my voice ring clear. "You all know me as Sarah Anderson. A quiet wife. A project manager. A woman who traveled too much and spoke too little." Several guests nodded faintly, unsure where this was going. "What most of you don't know," I continued, "is that for the past 7 years, I've been the lead director of a classified national security program, operating across 3 continents and under 5 different governments. My badge outranks your CEO's business card, your stock portfolios, and your family legacies." Gasps erupted. "She's government? She's the director? The project that saved the tech sector during the cyber war last year, wasn't that?" I smiled faintly. "The very project that stopped Harbor City from economic collapse last quarter?" I said. "That redirected federal funding and international trade privileges to one major beneficiary?" I looked directly at Justin. "The Anderson Group." Justin's face turned ashen. Jason Anderson dropped his cane. The guests finally understood. She made the Anderson Group what it is today. That rise in stock value last year wasn't luck. She protected them, funded them, pulled strings for them. I stepped forward, slow and controlled. "You all thought I was just a discarded wife. Just another woman scorned." I looked down at Bethany, who had finally gone quiet in the cuffs. "But I was the engine. The firewall. The shadow in every boardroom keeping your company from burning to the ground." Jason turned to Justin. "You betrayed that," he said, voice hoarse. "You betrayed the one person who made this empire unbreakable?" Justin's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Jason took a step forward and spoke with finality. "I, Jason Anderson, no longer recognize Justin Anderson as my son." A collective gasp. The kind that echoed in gossip circles and business blogs for years to come. "I disown him," Jason continued. "Effective immediately. His shares, his title, and his future with the Anderson Group are hereby revoked." The crowd broke into murmurs of disbelief. Guests backed away from Justin as if he carried contagion. Jason turned to me. "Miss Sarah," he said solemnly, "I offer my full support, my loyalty, to you. Whatever you decide next, I stand behind it." I nodded. "You're too late, Mr. Anderson. But I'll allow you the dignity of watching your house burn slowly. Brick by brick." He bowed his head. "Understood." I turned back to Ryan. "Take her," I said, motioning to Bethany. He nodded. "And him?" I looked at Justin. Then smiled faintly. "Not yet. Let him stew in the shame for a bit longer." Justin stared at me, trembling. "Sir, please." "Wrong name," I said, eyes gleaming. "It's Director Lee." And with that I turned my back to him for the last time. Justin stood frozen. His tailored tuxedo, custom designed for what was supposed to be his grand debut as Harbor City's elite groom, now looked laughably oversized. He wasn't the picture of success anymore. He was a man stripped of protection, of pride, and of power. And the guests knew it. They watched from every corner of the estate, Silent, blinking, recording. Some held their breaths. Others filmed discreetly. Every person knew instinctively that they were witnessing the collapse of a legacy. Jason Anderson had just disowned his only son. And I, Sarah Lee, was still standing tall, unbothered in heels that didn't so much click as strike. Bethany was long gone now, escorted by Ryan's team, her screams echoing briefly before fading behind the black doors of the convoy. I should have walked away then. But Justin had one last gasp of arrogance left in him. Is that it then? He snapped suddenly, stepping toward me. You've destroyed my wedding. Humiliated my fiancé. Stolen my family. Is this what you wanted, Sarah? A scene. I turned slowly. He was shaking, but not from fear, from rage and disbelief. From the realization that everything he thought he controlled had never been his in the first place. You think I did this to you? I asked softly. You did, he spat. You came here to ruin me. I raised a brow. No, I said. You ruined yourself. I just chose the right time to let everyone else see it. Jason watched his son, his face tight with revulsion. But he said nothing. Justin pressed forward, voice rising now. You think you're above me because you work for the government? Because Ryan bows to you? What does that make you? A glorified secretary with a badge. The air snapped with tension. Jason inhaled slowly. Then he moved. Prick. His palm struck Justin so hard the entire courtyard gasped. The sound echoed off the marble, off the floral arches, off every ounce of inherited arrogance that had once defined Justin Anderson. He staggered back, clutching his face, his eyes wide with disbelief. Jason's voice thundered across the gathering. Enough. He turned to the crowd, not ashamed but resolved. My son has brought disgrace not only to this family but to the very people who helped build our name. I stand behind Miss Sarah Lee not because I must, but because it is the only honorable thing to do. Gasps. Murmurs. He slapped him. In public. He chose her over his own son. Jason faced me, eyes glinting with a fierce respect. If you would allow me, he said, I would like to handle the punishment of both him and her personally. I studied him. Years ago I had believed Jason Anderson to be just another tycoon. Ruthless, yes, but self-serving. But the man standing before me now wasn't here to save himself. He was here to bury the mistake he had raised. I'll allow it, I said simply. Jason bowed once more. Thank you. But Justin wasn't done yet. He wiped the blood from the corner of his lip, straightened his suit and forced a smirk. This is a circus, he muttered. You're all insane. He played you. Every one of you. His eyes met mine, sharp with desperation. You can't erase me, Sarah. I'm still Justin Anderson. I'm still. Still what? I interrupted, my tone like ice cracking on glass. Still the boy your father had to babysit in every boardroom? Still the man who couldn't close a single merger without calling me in to proofread contracts while pretending I was just your wife? He said nothing. I took a slow step forward. Let me remind you of something, I said, voice low and firm. The Anderson Group's meteoric rise in the past 2 years? That wasn't market luck. That wasn't your leadership. That was me, redirecting federal infrastructure credits to prop up your supply chain. Me, burying the breach report from the Shanghai servers. Me, ensuring your trade licenses didn't get pulled when your expansion plan failed overseas. Pause. But you never noticed. Because the only numbers you cared about were in your mirror. The crowd was silent again. And Justin? He was finally listening. Enjoy whatever name you have left, Justin, I said. Because the next time I speak it, it'll be in a courtroom. He opened his mouth, but Jason's voice cut in like a blade. You will not speak another word. Justin turned to his father, shocked. Dad. Jason raised a hand. If you value what little dignity you have left, walk away. Now. There was a long, painful silence. Then Justin did something I never thought I'd see. He bowed his head. And stepped back. Like a scolded child in front of his headmaster. The guests began murmuring again. A few started to leave. Others stood stunned, their glasses still full, their wedding programs crumpled in forgotten fists. I turned to Ryan. We're done here. Ryan nodded. Vehicles are standing by. Do you want escort? No, I said. I'll walk. The path back through the estate was longer now, more open. No one dared stand in my way. Some nodded. Others simply stepped aside. I passed the altar, the one they'd built for Bethany, and paused. The floral arrangement was still intact. I plucked a single white rose from it, twirled it between my fingers, then dropped it where Bethany had stood in her gown. Like a tombstone. When I reached the gates, I saw a reflection of myself in the polished glass. Not a shadow. Not a wife. Not someone discarded. But a storm that chose when to strike, and whom to destroy. The headlines after the wedding lasted weeks. Every paper, every news feed, every gossip column, each competing for the juiciest headline. Director behind classified project destroys Anderson wedding. Jason Anderson disowns his own son in front of city's elite. Who really built the Anderson empire? Meet Sarah Lee. I didn't give a single interview. I didn't release a statement. I didn't need to. The silence only fed the storm. Within a month, the Anderson Group's board voted to strip Justin of his CEO title. Jason returned as interim head, cleaning up scandals, firing half of Justin's allies, and ensuring Bethany's name was erased from every company file. The footage of her being dragged out in cuffs went viral. She was tried for corporate espionage and fraud, with a long list of charges I didn't even have to push for. As for me, I went back to my work. The wedding was never the end game. It was a mere opening move. 5 years later, the city had changed. Towers had grown taller. The Anderson Group was now part of a massive national infrastructure alliance, thanks to the programs I quietly spearheaded. While the public saw Jason as the figurehead, insiders knew who pulled the real strings. Me. I had just returned from a defense summit when I received the news. Justin Anderson had been released from prison. I almost laughed when I heard. Not out of malice. Just at the absurdity of time. 5 years. 5 long years. I imagined him counting days behind bars, every minute spent reflecting on the empire he'd squandered and the woman he'd underestimated. That afternoon, I received a message from Jason Anderson himself. He wants to see you. I'll bring him tomorrow. He owes you a proper apology. I considered ignoring it. But then curiosity won. The meeting. It was a crisp autumn day when Jason arrived at my private residence. He had aged, white streaks now visible in his hair, but his posture remained unshaken, his presence still commanding. Behind him Justin followed. I almost didn't recognize him. Gone was the polished arrogance. He was thinner, paler. His sharp suits replaced by a plain gray jacket, his swagger hollowed out like a house abandoned by its owner. Standing next to him was a little girl about 4 or 5, clutching his hand. Her dark curls and clear, intelligent eyes made me pause. Bethany's child, no doubt. But those eyes, those were full of something Bethany never had. Respect. Jason spoke first. Sarah, he said formally, bowing slightly. I can never repay what you did for our family. I tilted my head. Jason, I told you years ago. You don't owe me anything. He glanced back at Justin, who shifted uncomfortably. Say it, Jason ordered. Justin looked at me. His mouth opened once, closed, then opened again. I'm sorry, he said at last. His voice cracked like a man unaccustomed to humility. I was wrong. About everything. I studied him for a long moment. He wasn't lying. Prison had done what nothing else could, broken him down into something human. But I wasn't here for his redemption. I looked down at the little girl. She stared up at me curiously, unafraid. What's your name? I asked gently. Lila, she said softly. Daddy says you helped our family. He says you're someone really important. I smiled faintly. Is that what he says? She nodded hard. He says when I grow up I should be like you. Brave. Strong. I crouched down eye level with her. Then promise me something, Lila. Her eyes widened. What? Promise me you'll grow up to be useful. Not just for your family but for this country. For the people who need someone brave. Lila's little hand clenched into a tiny fist. I promise. Jason chuckled quietly, pride flashing across his face. Justin's expression softened, though guilt still weighed heavy in his eyes. A quiet reckoning. When they left that day I stood by the window watching them walk down the driveway. Justin looked back once, his eyes meeting mine through the glass. Not with anger. Not with resentment. With regret. Deep raw regret. He mouthed something I barely caught. Thank you. I turned away. I didn't need his thanks. I had already moved on. Sarah Lee, untouchable. 2 months later, I was standing on the stage of the National Auditorium, receiving a Medal of Honor from the state. Cameras flashed. The announcer's voice boomed. For her unparalleled contribution to national security, technological innovation and infrastructure development, we honor Director Sarah Lee. I smiled as the medal settled against my collarbone. I wasn't just Justin's forgotten wife anymore. I was a name that would outlast every empire built on borrowed loyalty. I didn't expect to see him again. After the ceremony, after the medal, after the speeches and parades and applause, I assumed Justin would disappear. That he'd finally learn to live in the shadow I cast, and maybe raise his daughter far from the city that now knew my name better than his. But pain has a long memory. And guilt is even longer lived. The letter. It arrived in the Morning Post. Handwritten. No return address. Sir, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. But I need 5 minutes. There's something I have to say in person. I won't write it down because some things are too cowardly in ink. Please. Just 5 minutes. J. I stared at the letter for a long time. In my younger years I might have torn it in half. Or burned it. Or let it rot with the rest of the apologies men offer when they've run out of power. But now I was different. So I wrote back just 3 words. One last time. Rooftop. I chose the place. Not an office. Not a hall. Not a room. A rooftop. Specifically, the one above the original Anderson Group headquarters, where Justin first took me after we got married, pretending to be in love with my mind, even as he slowly dismantled it behind my back. I stood near the edge, hair pinned neatly, sunglasses on despite the sunset. A storm had rolled through earlier, and the sky was streaked in deep purples and orange fire. I heard the door open. He stepped out slowly. Justin Anderson. No tie. No jacket. He looked like a man who had run out of masks. He stopped 10 feet away from me. Hands in his pockets. Eyes red-rimmed. You look, he began then stopped. You always were the most composed woman I've ever known. I didn't speak. He swallowed. I brought something, he said, reaching into a canvas bag. Slowly he pulled out a small wooden box. It's not much. But it's what's left. He opened it. Inside was the cracked nameplate from his former office desk. Justin Anderson Go. Next to it a photo. Our wedding photo, creased, weathered, stained in one corner. He looked at me. I've kept it, he whispered. All these years. Even when I didn't deserve to. So I said nothing. He stepped forward slowly. His voice shook. Sarah, I know it's far too late to ask for anything. But I need you to hear me. The silence between us stretched wide, until he dropped to one knee. On the concrete. In a suit. He knelt. Head bowed. Palms open. I betrayed the only person who ever protected me, he said. You didn't just build this empire. You carried me when I didn't deserve it. You made me powerful, and I tried to make you small. The wind blew between us. And for what? He asked. For someone who wanted the crown but not the scars. I destroyed the very fortress I lived in. I finally took off my sunglasses. He looked up. My expression was unreadable. He continued. People think the worst thing I lost was my title, my company, my reputation. But it was you. That was the beginning of the end. He lowered his head again. If there's any way to cleanse the dirt I threw on your name, tell me how. I'll do it. I finally spoke. You can't cleanse it, I said softly. Some betrayals don't get washed. They get buried. He nodded slowly like he already knew that. I thought I could kneel for forgiveness, he whispered. But you don't owe me even that much, do you? No, I said. I don't. He stayed there unmoving. And for a strange moment I pitied him. Not because I missed him. But because I realized he would never know peace the way I did. His redemption would never come in glory or grand speeches. But in small, painful awakenings. Like this one. I took a deep breath. I don't hate you, Justin, I said. You're not worth hate. I simply moved past you. He blinked. Do you ever think of what we were? I smiled faintly. I think of who I became after you. I stepped past him. He remained kneeling. I reached the door and paused. I hope you become a better father than you ever were a husband, I said, not turning back. For Lila's sake. And yours. Then I walked down the stairs, heels echoing, steps steady, heart light. The aftermath. I heard he stayed on that rooftop for an hour after I left. I heard he cried. I didn't need to see it. Some griefs don't belong to you anymore. Later that week, a package arrived at my home. No note inside, just the cracked photo frame and nameplate, wrapped gently in linen. I placed them on a shelf in my study. Not as a trophy. Not as a wound. But as a relic of a woman I used to be. One who was broken. Then rebuilt. And then became untouchable. It began with a single call. The Secretary of Commerce himself. He didn't ask for a meeting. He requested an audience. Director Lee, the federal committee is forming a new global innovation coalition. They'd like you to lead the North American arm. There's no application. It's yours if you say yes. I didn't respond right away. Not out of hesitation but because I knew what came next. Within a week, 6 other calls came through. Tokyo, London, Geneva, Berlin, Silicon Valley, Tel Aviv. Each offering me something others spent lifetimes chasing. Autonomy. Influence. Legacy. The Sara Lee division. It launched 3 months later. An international tech intelligence and infrastructure branch. Named not after a corporation, not after a country, but after a woman. The Lee Initiative for Global Integrity. People called it the Lee Division. Some nicknamed it the Sara Lee Global. It became the gold standard in hybrid innovation, defense-grade security systems, AI ethical frameworks, environmental tech and satellite-level communications that even major nations scrambled to license. And at the center of it all? A single name that now opened every door. Sara Lee. Honor upon honor. The year ended with an invitation from the Department of National Recognition. A black tie gala held in D.C., attended by heads of state, senior intelligence and innovators from across the globe. I was seated beside the Chief Justice. Across from me sat the Vice President. When my name was called, the room rose before I even stood. A standing ovation, not for a title, not for a rank, but for who I had become. The speech was short. Sara Lee is the rarest kind of force, quiet in the wings, unstoppable in the storm. When others demanded credit, she delivered outcomes. When power tried to contain her, she built her own infrastructure. When I stepped onto the stage to receive the National Medallion for Global Strategic Excellence, the audience didn't just clap. They saluted. Justin Anderson watching. Later that month, I learned from a source that Justin had seen the broadcast. He didn't comment. But a neighbor of his told the press he sat on his porch the entire evening, watching the rerun with his daughter curled beside him. Is she really that famous, Daddy? No, he whispered. She's not famous. She's powerful. Lila's letter. Not long after the gala, I received a small envelope in the mail. No signature. Just a child's scrawl on the front. Inside was a carefully folded drawing. Me in a navy suit standing in front of satellites and flowers, with a small girl holding my hand. Underneath it. When I grow up, I want to be just like you, Lila. I pinned it to the board above my desk, next to my classified charts, my award and the framed medal from the state. Of all the honors I had received, that one meant the most. Because power isn't just about recognition. It's about influence that lasts beyond your own lifetime. An unexpected visit. Jason Anderson visited one final time. He brought an antique bottle of wine and a file folder. I've rewritten the Anderson Group's charter, he said. A portion of the trust and all international affairs now report directly to SLG. I've made sure no one can ever erase your contributions again. I raised a brow. Are you seeking forgiveness or permission? He smiled faintly. Neither. Just trying to die with a clear conscience. He looked around the glass-walled office that oversaw 4 continents. Everything this company became was because of you, he said. And when history writes its pages, I want your name printed in ink, not as a footnote. The interview I finally gave. 2 weeks later, I sat down for my first and only televised interview. The world had waited years to hear me speak. The host leaned in. Sara, when did you first realize how powerful you had become? I smiled slowly. When I no longer needed to speak to be heard. When rooms went quiet when I entered. When people stopped asking for proof and started asking for partnership. She hesitated, then asked, Do you have any regrets? I paused. No, I said. Only lessons. Then she leaned in again. And what would you say to the woman watching this, who's been forgotten, underestimated, or pushed aside? I didn't hesitate. Let them forget you. Let them discard you. Let them walk over your silence. Because when you rise, and you will, the sound of your name will haunt their ears for eternity. The city skyline stretched before me like a cathedral of light, steel and glass shimmering under the setting sun. I stood at the very top of the Anderson Group's headquarters. My own reflection stared back at me from the window, older, sharper, softer, only in the right places. It had been exactly 6 years since I walked out of that wedding with ashes in my hands and fire in my spine. Back then they had seen me as the woman who lost everything. No. They called me everything they once tried to deny me. Pioneer. Director. Architect of empires. National treasure. Ghost turn queen. But today wasn't about the titles. It was about something far more private. Jason Anderson's final goodbye. Jason passed quietly the night before. Heart failure. I had received the call from his estate executor. He'd left something behind for me. A single envelope, cream-colored. Handwritten. Inside was a note along with a folded copy of an old article. Old. Faded. From a decade ago. The headline read, "The Quiet Wife of Anderson Group's Rising Star." Jason had scribbled on the bottom of it. "History got it wrong. Fix it for them." And beneath that, in smaller script, "P.S. Thank you for saving the legacy even after we destroyed yours." I read the note twice. Then I set it down and let myself sit in silence. Grief is strange when it doesn't cut. When it simply settles. A visit from the future. Later that day Lila arrived. Now 9 years old, she walked with confidence, her hair braided, her shoes polished. She'd asked to visit. Alone. When she entered my office she didn't stare like she used to. She looked at me with the kind of respect children rarely learn, that young, earned, not taught. She handed me another letter. "My school said to write a report on the person who inspires me most," she said. "I didn't pick my dad. I picked you." I smiled, heart strangely full. Inside, in carefully printed block letters. "Director Sarah Lee saved our country and made the Anderson name famous, even when they forgot her. She's kind but strict. She always wears great shoes. She is smart. She is strong. She is not afraid to be alone. When I grow up I want to build things like she does. And never let anyone call me small." I folded the note and held it for a long time. Lila sat on the armrest of my chair. "Do you ever miss him?" I didn't lie. Not him. Just who I thought he could be. She nodded. "That makes sense." I offered her a caramel from the crystal jar. She took 2. One for her, one for her father. She didn't say it, but I noticed. Children know far more than we give them credit for. One last walk. That evening I walked the Anderson building alone. From floor to floor. Department to department. Where once I worked invisibly in the shadows, now the staff stood when I entered. Some even applauded. The marble walls bore portraits now. One of Jason. One of the original founders. And one newly installed. Sarah Lee, architect of integrity. I didn't stop to admire it. I had no need to. I had already lived it. Instead I passed the boardroom where Justin once shouted over me. It was silent now. A ghost of a room for a ghost of a man. Home at last. I returned home that night. The garden had bloomed in every color imaginable. Lavender and crimson, white jasmine and pale hydrangeas. I had planted them all myself. The silence of the house was no longer lonely. It was deliberate. A choice. I made myself tea and stood on the veranda. No calls. No messages. No crises. Just the sound of my name echoing in places I'd never set foot in, but where my legacy had already arrived. And as I looked up at the stars, I thought not of the wedding, not of the betrayal, not even of the honors. I thought of the woman who walked through hell and refused to come out burned. Only brighter. Final lines. They forgot their wife. The world remembered her name. Sarah Lee. And this time no one would dare forget it. The end.